Okay, recording started.
All
Welcome,
right,
my friend.
welcome to. So, my good friend Mike has agreed to join me on an epic adventure of learning Dwarf Fortress. I love Dwarf Fortress. I've been playing it for years. He has never played it. He knows nothing about it. So, before we get into it, I wanted to show him what it was, and I think that the IGN review really captures it. So we're just going to play that video, and if you need to pause it and ask any questions, you can. Otherwise, we're just going to enjoy this review together.
I can't wait to fully understand every aspect of it from this one video.
This will do it. Let's go. Let's go.
7 dwarves set out from the mountain home
I love it already.
to establish a new colony in a world rife with gods, monsters, and
Look at those
ancient legends.
graphics.
They are
That's
short,
sweet.
sturdy creatures fond of drink and industry. In their ingenuity, they will craft incredible artifacts, face great evils, and found the citadel to stand the test of ages.
Sounds easy.
Or they'll dig a little too close to a volcano and flood the whole thing with lava. That's par for the course in Dwarf
Happens.
Fortress. And you can bet I'll be generating another world, do it all again, either way.
Okay.
This modern classic has been simulating amazing stories of triumph and tragedy for nearly 20 years already. But its incredible depth has long been locked behind an accessibility barrier.
Yeah, you can switch to that view.
Keyboard control.
Okay, I just want to point out that this right here, and right before we started this video, I accidentally stumbled with John into a setting that I could turn this on to. I love this. This to me is like I could have done this in WordPerfect 5.0. Or as I said, right, we could program this in QBasic.
It was tough to play in, and I started using tile sets almost right away because it could be hard to see, and if you try to switch in the current game, the resolution isn't great. You can hard to zoom in and out, and so it's a lot of data right away. But we'll show you what it is when we get into the game.
Can't wait. Cannot wait.
It's a wall that was worth climbing over. But now its long-awaited Steam release has helped ease that effort with attractive pixel art and a slew of quality of life improvements, fundamentally enhancing this already amazing game for a new generation of storytellers.
I saw that lava at the top of the screen.
Yep.
Gonna burn me some dwarf bodies.
If you've never dared these intimidating tunnels yourself, you've almost certainly felt Dwarf Fortress's impact. Developer Bay 12 Games effectively founded the genre we now call the colony sim with it.
It must have been right around the time that Minecraft came out.
And influencing countless others.
It inspired
Minecraft. Many successors, none can procedurally generate such a rich world and fill it with interesting characters.
Okay, so I like this. So these are autonomous guys walking around, right?
Yeah.
Its Steam release finally brings the controls in line with those descendants too, adding actual mouse support, a fully fledged graphical
interface. It's like SimCity on steroids,
rather than being forced to direct.
You sounded excited when you said mouse support.
Mouse support alone is worth the cost of entry.
The second time,
and the simple ability to click through the interface is a breeze.
It's true.
Dwarf meets world. Okay, I like it.
For all that remarkably thorough improvement, Dwarf Fortress is still an unapologetically complex game. Its new tutorial helps getting you started and teaching you how to.
We're not going to use the tutorial, by the way.
Could cover a tenth
that small
of what you might
DOS window.
No,
those new to this genre will need patience. This is, after all, a game where you have separate workshops to spin thread, weave cloth, then dye that cloth before making even a single dwarven sock. It's a game where you'll become an amateur mineralogist, as all good dwarves are.
And you don't want to run out of socks.
Where in the geological strata to dig for iron, tin, coal, or gold. You'll
dwarves dig. I get that.
Gabbro and granite. You'll almost certainly read an article describing what a quern is.
Do you know what quern is?
No.
Use it to grind grain to make flour.
Oh, all right. So it's like a mill, like a small mill. Okay.
You set their direction in the world, but can't make them do a damn thing to your personal timetable. And it's delightful that you can. Each dwarf has thoughts, memories, favorite things, personal skills, relationships, and physical traits.
And it comes up on here. Oh, that's fascinating.
Bizarre decisions because of who
they collect thoughts throughout the game, and that'll affect their moods and how hard they work and what they want to do.
or even poignant.
This is like Final
Everyone
Fantasy if it
has their
hated
own
itself.
tales of the time a dwarf went sprinting out into a goblin horde because they forgot their socks in the pasture.
What is with
But
the
you're just as likely
socks?
to see a beautiful story, like my two doctors who got married in the middle of a goblin attack. As nearby
What?
patients cried out in pain and enemies were at the gates, they held an impromptu wedding in the ER, officiated by a friend.
That's really
Poignant,
quite sweet.
as though they decided that if their lives were threatened, they would rather die married than apart. Hilarious, because a patient was mid-surgery and everyone involved was spattered with blood. These stories are everywhere.
And
in
they are
Dwarf
actually
Fortress,
spattered with
and
blood. It
finding
talks
them as part
which
of
body
play,
parts are covered with blood at
notifications
the
let you
time. It
know that
tracks
certain
that.
things are happening. But to fully
How does
understand
it even?
you have
How
to
did they
read the event
program that
log,
It
in
the
tracks
there?
history
everything.
of your dwarf. Spend some time
Okay, I'm getting
just
into this now.
poking
Truly.
around your fort. It's deeply rewarding for players who are
Yeah,
curious,
no kidding. It's like reading a
introspective,
fantasy
or who
novel
enjoy
that's
role-playing
generated
with
for
Fortress
you
inhabitants,
automatically based on the
figuring
game.
out why they do what they do.
I feel so good. She feels euphoric.
They often feel euphoric after they get drunk,
Dwarf
which will be
Fortress is
once
a
a month.
nerd game par excellence,
Can I tell you?
asking for your
I would love
attention
that
and
when I
care
was
in a
dating.
vast range of places. There is always
You feel
something
euphoric
new
right now.
to
Yes,
learn,
I do.
a challenge
Okay.
to attempt, or an absurd project to try. I don't find all its complexity scary or intimidating. I find it a challenge I
Yeah,
want to rise
I
to.
agree.
The
That's
community's
yeah.
motto has long been that losing is fun. And you'll see players describing doomed ends that range from poisonous monster breath to dwarven civil wars as a
Mm.
potential source of that fun. You're here to collaborate with game systems,
So it
not fight against.
are there other dwarf kingdoms in there that you're playing
Yes.
against?
So well. So what'll happen is you will first generate a world, like literally your own world, and it will then generate hundreds of years of history that are computer generated and keep track of literally tens of thousands of people and characters throughout that history. And then you can actually look into that history in the legends mode and track people to people and see who went where. And they will form civilizations. Those civilizations will go to war and then have peace and grow and expand and absorb each other. And then when you go to set up your fort, you will pick a civilization. So, and your civilization may be at war with other civilizations, almost always with the goblins, potentially with the elves, sometimes with other dwarven civilizations. You can actually like go and raid another civilization, right? So if you decide you're going to attack another fort, that may start a war between your civilization and theirs, and you will get updates when the ambassador visits you once a year. It'll update the history and say, "Hey, we're now at war with them, and we've lost 1,000 dwarves in war to them. Thank you very much." Or through your efforts, we actually took them over and we've absorbed all their lands. Good job. We're now going to make you a baron. So these things can happen in this whole. It keeps track of the whole world while you are a part of it. Later on, you can retire from your fort and then explore. When adventure mode comes, you can do kind of a single player and go around, and you can go visit the fort that you created, and you'll meet the dwarves who were in your fort who you know about now and interact with them. I have often founded another fort because I got bored or lost or
Of
died or whatever,
course.
killed
Or
everyone with
die.
water.
Oh,
And
yeah.
but
Lack of socks.
but sometimes you get migrant waves, and I've had migrants who came in who because I name them, I know who they are, and I see that same dwarf who was at my old fort comes to my new fort, and you can look up and you can see his relationships. You can see, oh, he was married to that other dwarf and she died. That's sad. Oh, but he had 3 kids. Where are they? And you can see where they live. And so the whole thing, it maintains track of all of these hundreds of thousands of things going on at a time. And it can be as deep as you want to go, or as shallow as you feel. You just want to do a colony sim and ignore all your dwarves, you can do that too. But I
Yeah, but
think
even that is
it's still a lot.
yeah.
So
You
yeah,
can't even use the word shallow to describe.
it's not. There are those
That's
who play
incredible.
this for the role playing aspect. There are those who play it for loving the depth and the finding these connections. There are those. I'm more on the side of I love the systems and the efficiencies
Yeah.
and the little
Yeah.
traps and doohickeys you can set up. And I like making the most efficient fort possible, and then seeing how it completely collapses because I messed something up.
Now, do you find that first off, I've got to say, I can't even begin to imagine how they created this game this way. I mean, it's got to be self-generating in a lot of ways, but they must have started with some key principles and then had it spin off. But it almost seems like an artificial intelligence level of generation for the game.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, they
was.
can't possibly have pre-done all this stuff themselves,
I
right?
mean, this is why it's been in development for 20 years. They spent 4 years doing development, released it in 2006 in a alpha nigh on unplayable format. At that point, it only had 1 Z level. They then added more Z levels, and they continue to try to just the goal is to really simulate everything they can and let the story tell itself. While it
Yeah.
is a game, it's not a game in the sense that you can beat it. It's a game
Hmm.
in that it's an instrument that you can play and learn the stories that come out of it.
Hmm.
And they're right in that, the doom of your fort will be the story you remember. I mean, I remember my first really well working fort, and I knew that when you get a population of a certain level, you are now at risk of being attacked by were creatures.
Uh-huh.
And they don't just have werewolves in this; they have were creatures. So it could be a were lion, it could be a were giraffe, it could
Where
be a
ferret.
yes, and any animal they could have a were animal. And so I had decided that we need to build a wall so I have more warning when they show up. They will slaughter my livestock first, and I get everyone inside safely. And while we are building that wall, everyone is outside my fort building the wall. The were creature shows up and he's standing above the door on a cliff where I had meant to wall off and leaps down. And now half of my population is locked outside with the were creature facing them down.
Oh my god.
He slaughters about 10 of them. And then a miner happens to be walking by, one of my miners. He has a pick and just drives it directly to the were creature's head and just kills it with one hit. And like, that was amazing. But I have all these injured dwarves and I didn't know what to do because they were injured laying there. I hadn't set up a hospital. And
Yeah. Do you have
so
any
I
healers or something,
so
or
you
how does
can
that?
set up a hospital, you can have doctors. But if they've been bit or scratched by the were creature, they now have
Yeah,
the
they're
disease.
were creatures,
So
right?
I
Yeah.
get everyone inside as best I can and I wall off the entrance and I watch as the full moon comes around again. There's 5 that were laying unconscious outside. Oh, they are immediately healed and they jump up, and I now have 5 of these were creatures outside. But I missed 3 who were now in the fort, and
Oh
so
no.
so they start slaughtering everyone inside the fort. And at that
You
point,
know
I'm
that
like,
one miner was like, son of a gun.
I'm like, well, that's this fort done. And I just kind of like, I'll retire that, and I've learned my lesson. Prepare earlier, or
And don't let were creatures murder
don't
everything.
like were creatures. But I remember that distinctly 2
That's
years later
great.
of just and because it was the graphics are simple. I remember like looking at this just downward view of like where my cave ends to the outside and all my little dwarf icons outside and just him standing right above the door 2 Z levels up.
Yeah.
Obviously, and in my head, you're picturing in your head, he's staring down this feral beast at all this
Uh-huh.
fresh meat,
Ready
and
to
he just
jump.
leaps down at them, and I'm like, oh my god. Well, the timing of this was so impeccable that the fall of my fortress very memorable. That's the losing is fun, right? So all of my work, all of my preparation, all of my learning ended in me learning a new lesson and a distinct memory that rivals books you read, like, wow, that's a memorable scene.
Well, I
It's
was
now a
just gonna
memorable scene in my
say,
head.
do people actually write books based off of what happens here? Because it's a narrative arc in some ways. It's really fascinating.
So they are, and there are they used to do this more, and I think it's going to start picking up again. Is that used to kind of like a pass the game series where people would take on and they would play a fort for 1 year and write what happened. And then
Hmm.
they pass on the fort, and someone else would take over that fort and write what happened. And so there's a famous one called Boat Murdered. I guess you've never heard of it, but it's the most famous story of Boat
I love
Murdered.
these names.
And and because it'll randomly generate a name for your fort, and you can choose to not use that. But I think having a random name is awesome. So
Much
Boat
better.
Murdered was the name of this fort,
I will never forget Boat Murdered
and
now.
they kept getting attacked by these elephants who just kept slaughtering these people coming in because the elephants they had dialed their viciousness way too high, and they're too big and too strong, and so they're just slaughtering these people left and right. But you can't control if you tell the dwarf like they can engrave on walls murals, and this one engraver just kept engraving all these elephants slaughtering the people because that's what he knew about. And so now the fort is covered in these engravings of these slaughtered elephants.
Oh
But
my
but
god.
they wind up pumping up and running the magma out the front of the fort, and they had the concept of pull the lever. What became like the thing of when you pull the lever, it would release it and literally just flood the map with magma, killing all the elephants. And then
which is brilliant engineering.
which works great, but then it killed all of obviously the trees, and that made
Yeah.
I think it made the elves angry, and so the elves show up with an army, and they're like, "Well, pull the lever." So they pull the lever, and it just floods out and kills all the enemies again. And so pull the lever became kind of how you solve these problems, and it became a meme within the community. But these are the kind of stories that the game generates. So it's not just a game you can beat. It's not a everyone knows how Zelda ends. You beat Ganon.
It's a pre-done arc. Yeah.
Every world has a different story. They have different gods, different musical instruments, different civilizations, the rise and fall of necromancers and their towers. And so that's what this game is about. Every game is different.
So I love this because, and I wasn't sure as you were describing it to me, and I watched your videos and I still had no idea what was going on. I still don't, and I recognize that. But one of my favorite parts of reading Tolkien, I was a huge Tolkien fan, been my whole life, were the appendices that would go through the history of the families and the little asides about particular characters that you would never read about, and he's passed away, you're never going to know more about
Yeah.
them, and the genealogy and the origin of the words and all that. This actually sounds in some ways more akin to that than it does to like a Sims game or like a Tekken or
Yeah.
something like that. And I love that. That's a brilliant concept. I can't imagine how they did it.
It was 20 years of a passion project and full-time dedication. It's amazing what you can do. I guess that's
wild.
so anyway, let's continue the video. You can see what else
finish
is up.
this one. And I love the map in the top right. I can see
And the
that.
fact that most fortresses end in ruin is simply part of how you learn the deep systems, gaining ever more knowledge of how to survive dwarven life for next time. You set your own goals here. You could make your fort a hub of crafts and trade, selling carved stone tchotchkes to the wider world. Or instead, one where dwarven smiths use the secrets of steelmaking to forge an invincible military. Either way, you'll be building a lot. And construction is an entire subgame on its own. Placing fortifications and workshops is one end of it, but so is making efficient fortress designs where dwarves only travel a minimal distance
part of my
from their
favorite
beds
part
to
of
their
it.
duties.
I can
It's
see that.
especially
This
fun
is a
to build
systems
huge
engineering
stacks,
mindset.
be they
It's
classic
exactly
pits or entire false entranceways that open, let in attackers, and then seal before flooding with water or magma. Or maybe minecarts filled with swords that stop abruptly and fling them into enemies. We call those dwarven shotguns.
Yes.
One of my favorite challenges to build around comes when you open up the large, monster-filled caverns.
That's hilarious.
Opening caves attracts wandering monster-slaying adventurers who will petition to live in your fort so they can explore the depths.
Okay.
Which means you'll probably want to build a really cool tavern, complete with staff and bars. All
Yes.
adventurers need a tavern, after all. I love to read the combat logs of slayers against monsters. Battles may look
so
like
this is what
blinking
you were
sprites
describing, right?
smashing
Like
into
the
each other on
generated
the surface,
history.
but diving into
Well, this is the
log
combat
where
log.
actually
So
what's
you won't
happening
see
is
fighting,
great.
right? You just see
Spears
the
get stuck
the
in
icons
bone,
flashing. But if you
limbs
click
are
on it,
severed, and
it's
wounded
detailed
warriors slip in
action
puddles
by
of their own blood.
action. So you can see here, the giant cave toad falls over. The giant cave toad attacks the axe dwarf, but she jumps away. The axe dwarf backs to the giant cave toad in the right front leg, and so it keeps track of. There's no hit points in the game. They actually built. Every creature has so many bones and limbs and so much blood, literally a volume of blood, and keeps track of how much blood they still have. It actually keeps track of all the teeth individually. So if a dwarf gets punched in the face and loses 2 teeth, it now knows, oh, he now only has 30 teeth. It keeps track of how many teeth they have, which also means, though, that you can have random lucky strikes, right? And so my story of the were creature attack is lucky hit by someone who had no combat experience, but a pickaxe is a very good weapon if it happens to hit him right in the head.
Yeah.
And so it's an instant kill because that's how it's programmed.
And so let's say a dwarf. And so here we've got Bucks the giant cave toad in the front left leg with her battle axe and so on. Let's say a character comes out of a fight alive, but is hamstrung. Does
Yes.
it remember that? And then if it happens
Yes.
again, it actually that's a weakness
Well
that it
well, so
exploits?
so so so, yeah, they can slowly heal. If they lose a limb, they can actually get crutches, and they actually have a skill of crutch walking for how fast they can get. There was now this starts to sound very, very awful, but there were some players who would purposely try to get their dwarves maimed such that they lost their legs,
Hmm.
because then they could train them in crutch walking to the point where they were as fast on crutches without legs. And now they can no longer be damaged if someone tried to attack their legs. So you know that they had less
That's
places to
brilliant.
get
That's probably like
hit.
a quarter of the attacks.
And so do you have
That's demented.
doctors? You have doctors, and there are multiple kinds of doctors. There's bone setting, there's wound dressing, so there's different kinds of doctors who have different skills to help heal them. You also have infection if you don't have soap or clean water or both. And so you can have brackish water or salt water, but that won't help you as much as fresh water. So they could get an infection and die. So even a minor injury with no medical system could lose a dwarf to an infection.
So, in terms of resources, is there, I mean, this sounds like an enormous amount of resources that you'd be tracking and watching and growing and developing. Is there a set series of resources? I mean, here, and I'm dumbing it down, but when you look at Minecraft, which you said was inspired by this, you've got rock and you've got trees and blah, 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 water and so on and so forth. Is it like that, or is it really you're there and you discover this stuff as you're developing your dwarf fortress?
So the beauty of Dwarf Fortress is that there's no like tech tree like there are in other games. You have
Hmm.
access to whatever you want as long as you can acquire it. So when you go to embark, you'll bring certain things with you, certain supplies. I tend to be a minimalist when it goes to embarking because I also keep track of, again, back to the efficiency. There's hauling jobs, right? So the more
Hmm.
stuff I bring, the longer it takes to unload the wagon into the fort you begin digging
Supply
out.
chain, yeah.
So in my mind, I bring minimal food and water, make some more booze as soon as I get there. I bring tools,
My man.
and then I bring coal and ore that I'll get out of the cart later on when I need it. But other people, they bring all the cloth and the thread and bags and gems and other stuff just in case. You can bring furniture with you, or you can make it on site. So so you will need supplies for everything. In order to dress wounds, you do need cloth. You do need, if they break a bone, you do need either splints, or you can get gypsum plaster and you can make casts. So
Wait, I'm sorry. Gypsum plaster?
yeah,
The game actually has gypsum plaster built into one of the things that you can use to set a
yes,
wound?
yes. so so these are the things you have to keep track of. But you but but you don't actually have to. So the beauty though is that once you learn to play the game, you're not keeping track of a lot of this.
No, of
You
course.
you actually have a built-in manager who you can give orders to. You can have standing orders that you give the dwarves about what they collect and don't collect, and what they
So you're
move and don't move and throw away.
outsourcing the running of the Dwarf Fortress to managers who will run it for you in the game.
Yes, but you have to pick the right manager, because if he gets drunk or
Of
injured, then he won't do his
course.
job. And then
And if he loses his legs and he's not as fast on crutches, that's going to be really
so
challenging.
it's like you designate a dwarf to be your trader, right? Who will go and talk to other traders, and he can negotiate, and he builds negotiating skills. You can have either any dwarf do it, or you can pick somebody. You usually want to pick somebody. But if he's too busy either socializing or drinking or sleeping, I've had them where, like, I just couldn't keep track of where they were, or I built a temple too late. So he's like, I need to pray and do my visit to the temple. He stayed there for a month, finishes up. I'm like, oh, thank God he's going to do a trade. He's like, I am so thirsty. And so he wanders off to the side of the fort to find his favorite alcoholic beverage, gets drunk. And he's like, I'm pretty hungry too. Goes to the other side, and by the time he's done, he starts heading off to the trade depot. And they're like, well, that's the season. And the traders left. And so I didn't trade that season because I picked a very unreliable trader
But a
dwarf.
very religious one.
Well, so they have different needs, and they will become distracted if they don't fill these needs. And one may be like, I need to commune with my specific god or one of my five gods, and I need different temples for this. So you'll find out these things as you look at your dwarf's thoughts and feelings, and you try to manage them.
I I I don't know how to respond to this. I can tell you. So one of the things that I do professionally is work with students to develop soft skills. And I feel like this would be good practice for that. Because it's exactly what you're supposed to learn for teamwork, collaboration, and
Yeah.
managing people.
Yeah.
Except it's dwarves on a
So for
computer.
who a bunch of short folk fond of drinking industry.
That's
It's
right. Which, by the way, definitely sounds like my people.
yeah.
All right, so let's finish this
Let's keep
off because
going.
I've gotta figure
Blood.
this out.
Desperate fights come down to unarmed struggle, with one side choking the life out of the other. This is a struggle that really means a lot once you get to know the
One would
characters in
think.
question. Sometimes a good day in Dwarf Fortress is fighting off a dragon attack. Sometimes it's seeing that one of your dwarves likes frogs and then making some frog statues for their bedroom.
Oh my god.
Which they will get happy thoughts seeing. So you might want to do
Of course,
that.
many of the places where this vast and beautiful game has flaws are the same as they were before its Steam release. So much is going on at any given time that performance inevitably suffers as
Yeah.
maps grow in size and
Mhm.
complexity. Building ever larger will inevitably bring what the community calls FPS death, with forts of more than 200 dwarves rarely sustainable on
Yeah.
any but the beefiest PCs.
Yeah.
As always, generating smaller worlds and picking smaller fortress sites helps, as is making sure your dwarves throw their dirty socks into a magma-based disposal system. The new interface also makes a heroic effort, but still struggles to contain the sheer volume of stuff in play.
Yeah.
Dwarves alone have a dozen tabs in their information panel, and
Yes.
item
Each
lists
dwarf
can get
has
quickly
that.
overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The updated controls are pretty flexible, at least, and let you rebind just about anything.
So that's what
a
you and I were
smart,
just talking about.
player-friendly nod to the fact that learning to
You had
bind-
memorized the original hotkeys, right? But then they
Yeah.
switched it up.
Yeah, because I would play on my laptop often, just on the road or whatever, and I liked that I didn't need a mouse.
Yeah.
And you could do a lot. You could set a lot of commands right away. I could get into the manager field right away and just start typing and get things done fast. And there's some things now in terms of designations that are not easy to do. They made it so you can do some control with like arrow keys for mining. But I
Mhm.
used to just very quickly holding down shift draw out a fort, and now I'm sitting there with a mouse. It's
Which is
nice.
never as effective. Yeah, I prefer the keyboard myself, actually.
So we will be able to learn some hotkeys. They just again they rebound them, and so all of a sudden I'd go to do something, and instead of doing what I thought I was doing, I was randomly canceling. I was randomly turning off orders that I wanted to run, and I said, and it used to be when you entered a menu, it automatically paused the game. It now always runs unless you manually pause, and so I think I'm doing great. All of a sudden I realize I've missed 2 weeks of time
Of course,
Where my-
fiddling around with the
where my
settings.
dwarves are sitting around with nothing to do because I hadn't given them the orders.
Drinking, eating, sitting in the church. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Now, have you run into this FPS death with regards to the size of the fortress?
So I haven't gotten to where I had to give up on a fort, but I've gotten to where it's been painful to play. And usually it's come down to a lot of you have too many dwarves. I can usually get rid of stuff, but they do keep track of that. They're little hoarders at times, and they'll dump stuff in there like when their clothes wear away. If you have new clothes, they'll go get them, but they take their tattered clothes, they put it in their cabinet in their bedroom, and the computer's keeping track of where they are and how much wear is on them, and they slowly wear there. So it's keeping track of all these things, and then you wind up with a lot of livestock, right? So your dogs are having puppies, and the cats are having kittens, and it's doing pathing for all these things as they're going and finding their own food or they're hunting vermin, and so there's just so much processing going on that you get down to like 10 frames per second, and it's approaching bad video, and then it approaches slideshow.
Yeah.
And so what you do is you go on like, well, I guess we're slaughtering all the animals this week. And you just like set all the puppies to slaughter. and and but that improves things, but then you have all this puppy meat. So now you have to put in an order to the kitchens to cook up lavish roasts of puppy meat. And then you can sell that to the visiting traders for actually quite a good bit of coin.
Okay, let's back up for a minute here because you could not possibly have come up with that as a random example. You murdered a bunch of puppies and sold them. Am I correct about this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it was delicious.
But but then you also learn like, cages could hold an infinite number of animals, so you can just shove all the puppies in this cage and then slowly take them out one at a time to slaughter as needed. Often it's better to wait until they're full grown because you get more meat and bones out of them
Well,
than
that's
this slaughter
just logical.
puppies. Yeah,
You want that marbled puppy meat. Yeah.
you do.
All right. Let's finish this off now that I've got that clarified.
And shortcuts will still be important to make any experience playing Dwarf Fortress smooth. For me, learning where every nugget of information is kept and the fastest way to access it is part of the charm. You can't love Dwarf Fortress and also complain that it's too complicated. Its complexity
Yeah,
necessitates
that's the
its
point.
form.
Yeah.
You don't buy a Ferrari and then complain that it requires constant maintenance to reach its potential.
Of course, you also don't murder puppies in a
because it is
Ferrari.
a machine made by
can,
two
but you
dedicated
shouldn't.
craftspeople over decades.
Fair
tuned for
point.
precisely one purpose:
It may have
to
happened.
generate entire worlds and fill them with endless adventure. If I had to pick one game to play for the rest of my life, it would be Dwarf Fortress.
That is
because
a
I don't
bold
think
statement.
I'd ever run out of new and fascinating things to do. Infinitely explorable in its complexity and equally rewarding in the depth you'll find there. This is the quintessential world simulation and building management game.
Yeah, it sounds like
Until
it.
now, its
Yep.
magnificent worlds have been inaccessible to all but the dedicated few. But this new Steam version is beefed up with lovely graphics and equipped with modern controls, opening the floodgates for a new generation
Modern
to
controls.
blissfully drown in its magnificent
with
story
mouse.
engine.
Mouse.
Dwarf Force is a genre-defining masterpiece, proving just how incredible video games can be when a developer has a precise goal
You can
and
kill it there.
valiantly strives to.
All right. That
So
is
that's what we're
just
going to be
awesome.
playing. So
I can't. I'll be honest with you. I had some trepidation going into this. I still have it, but it is overwhelmed by the joy of listening to you describe murdering puppies
well-
and pulling the lever.
the hard part will be like is if I see you making a critical mistake, do I tell you?
No, you
and
let them
so
die.
and so I may sometimes, again, losing is fun, but I think we'll try to teach you all the basics first, and get you into a basic stable fort, and then we can talk about what you want your goals to be.
I
Because I think
appreciate
that says that every fort, for at least for me now, once you figure out how to survive, every fort has a goal. So I liked building giant library fort. Very cool. You actually have scholars come to visit you from around the world, bring their knowledge, write books, put them in your library, and then you make copies of those books. You can even sell the copies if you want to spread that knowledge elsewhere, which is very cool. You could build grand temple structures that have prophets come and visit, and then they will found new religions. You can have so these are the things that you can build. You can build just giant, ridiculous monuments of engineering. I was watching one where this guy who does Twisted Logic Gaming showed how he basically flooded the entire. First, he drained the ocean so that he could dig out more of it, and then he reflooded the ocean again. But he had built an island now because he drained it out, carved out his peninsula, and then let the ocean come back in so that he could build his own island. These are the engineering things you could
I
work on.
believe that's the plot to Superman Returns,
It
unless I
probably
missed
is.
my guess. And you have to wonder, if someone drains the ocean, where does it go?
Well, so he just drains his section because you
I
move the
see.
water away faster than it can
More
come
of a
back in.
sea. Yeah.
So anyway, but I think our first goal will obviously be just to learn the basics, build a small little fort of 20 dwarves who don't starve to death, and then we'll figure out where we want to
It's
go
gonna
from
be
there.
enough of a challenge for me. I can't wait to start playing this game, buddy. This is going to be so much fun, and I'm going to embarrass the living hell out of myself. So I appreciate you being there to see it.
It's going to be great. So anyway, for all
right,
of you,
man.
anyone who's watched this, we don't have an exact schedule yet, but we will. We have the game installed. We will get going with this probably in the next few weeks, and hopefully release a few episodes a month. So,
Yeah.
Mike, thanks for joining me, and
My pleasure, my friend.
we'll see you next time.
All right. Adios, folks.
Bye.